I was driving in the middle of the night when a violent storm gathered on the horizon. The sky darkened and the first lightning flashed across the sky. As the rain began, the road became a dangerous labyrinth of water and mud. The wipers fought against the torrential downpour, but it was as if the storm wanted to deepen the darkness. The wind howled around the truck as if trying to rip it from the road. The trees by the roadside bent under the force of the gusts, and I felt the tension within me grow. Something wasn't right. This weather was more than just a storm. It was as if something eerie was creeping over the road, approaching me. Suddenly, my gaze fell on the GPS. It showed that I was on a road that shouldn't exist. No reception, no connection to the outside world. I was alone, lost in an endless darkness. Through the pouring rain, I could barely see anything, but suddenly a figure appeared by the roadside. It just stood there, motionless in the midst of the storm. My heart pounded. Who the hell would be out in this weather? I slowed the truck, unable to avert my gaze from this gloomy silhouette. As I got closer, I saw that the figure was wearing a long coat that flapped in the wind. Its face was hidden under a hood, but I could feel the glowing eyes staring at me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Something was absolutely wrong with this scene. I stopped, unsure whether I should offer help or just drive on. But when I looked out the window, the figure was gone. The rain had swallowed it as if it had never been there. An uneasy feeling spread within me. I had the unsettling feeling of being watched. I drove on, my heart pounding in my throat. Suddenly, the radio began to crackle on its own. The station kept jumping back and forth as if someone was desperately trying to establish a connection. Then I heard it, a whispering voice calling my name. I tried to turn off the radio, but it ignored my command. The voice grew louder, more urgent, and I now understood the words. "Turn back, you shouldn't be here." The words sounded distorted, as if they came from a place beyond this world. My mind told me that this wasn't possible, that it was just the sound of the storm, that my brain was forming words, but deep down I knew I was in danger. This road, this storm, they didn't want to let me go. As the storm subsided for a moment, I dared a glance in the rearview mirror. My blood froze as I saw shadows moving in the darkness. They weren't people, at least not in any form I recognized. They scurried across, dancing in an unnatural movement as if driven by something evil. The shadows seemed to be heading towards my truck. Every instinct told me to just drive away, but my hands were paralyzed. I could only watch as they approached, closer and closer, until they almost reached the truck. Then, at the last moment, they disappeared. I shook my head, trying to get rid of the images that had burned into my mind, but the thought remained. Was I being followed, or had I already fallen into something from which there was no escape? Without warning, the temperature in the truck dropped dramatically. My breath turned into small clouds in front of my face. It was as if someone had opened the window to the underworld and the cold poured in. I turned up the heater, but it was no use. The cold was not of this world. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, but the trembling didn't stop. The cold seemed to come directly from within me, as if I had absorbed something that wouldn't let go. I was sure that the cold was a harbinger, a sign that I was moving deeper into the darkness. Every sound, every creak of the truck echoed in this icy silence. There was no escape from this oppressive cold, and I began to realize that I was on a journey of no return. The storm subsided, revealing a small, dilapidated village before me. The buildings were old, the windows dark, as if they hadn't seen living souls for decades. I couldn't understand how this village had appeared on my route. It wasn't on the map. Slowly, I drove down the main street, observing the empty houses. It was as if someone had abandoned the place and forgotten to turn off the lights. The atmosphere was ghostly, as if the walls of the houses were whispering their own tales of horror. I searched for a clue, for a sign of life, but everything was silent, too silent. My gaze fell on an old inn at the end of the street. Its sign hung loose, swaying in the wind. An inexplicable force drew me there, as if it were the only way to escape the nightmare. When I turned off the engine, I heard it again, the whispering. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, carried by the wind sweeping through the deserted streets. The words were incomprehensible, but the tone was clear: warning, threat, despair. I opened the truck door and got out, my legs feeling like lead. Every step seemed accompanied by the whispering, as if invisible eyes were watching my movements. The wind carried the sound of children's laughter and crying to me, as if the ghosts of past times were trapped here. I didn't know why I was moving towards the inn, but it was as if the whispering was calling me, urging me to discover the fragile truth. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back, but my feet wouldn't obey. I reached the inn door and hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached out to open the door, I noticed something on the doorknob, a fresh, bloody fingerprint. The blood hadn't dried yet, it gleamed in the dim light. I felt sick. Who had been here, and why did this sight make my pulse race? Something had happened here, something terrible, and I was about to stumble right into the middle of it. Still, I couldn't turn away. It was as if the place had cast a spell on me. Carefully, I placed my hand on the doorknob. The cold steel sent a shiver through my body. I pushed the door open, and a cold gust of air hit me. Darkness lay before me, and I knew I was on the threshold of something that should have remained hidden. Inside, it was silent, too silent. The room was shrouded in complete darkness, except for a faint glimmer of light filtering through a broken window. The furniture was covered with a thick layer of dust, as if no one had set foot here for years, and yet it felt as if something was here. I stepped slowly further in, each step stirred up dust that seemed to dance in the air. An old clock hung on the wall, its hands still. Time had stopped here, frozen in this moment. It was a place beyond time, beyond reality. As I looked around, I discovered something strange on the floor, an old diary half hidden in the shadows. I picked it up and a shiver ran down my spine. The cover was leather, and when I opened it, I saw that the pages were covered with a script I couldn't decipher. They weren't letters, but symbols, as if from another world. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy, like the beating of a heart. I turned around, but there was nothing, only the darkness that surrounded me, threatening to swallow me. The footsteps came closer, but I couldn't pinpoint the source. It was as if the room itself was alive. Panic gripped me. I had to get out of here immediately. But when I turned to the door, it was gone. Instead, I stood before a wall of shadows that seemed to move. The whispering grew louder, now like screams echoing in the darkness. I felt the air being squeezed from my lungs. At that moment, I realized the truth. There was no escape. This place had me, and it wouldn't let me go. The darkness crept closer, enveloping me, and before I lost consciousness, I heard one last guttural laugh, as if something was celebrating its victory. It was a quiet night, and I had a delivery to make down a secluded forest road. The moon was barely visible, hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds. But as I drove deeper into the forest, I noticed a dense fog settling over the road. It came suddenly, as if rising from the ground, spreading like a living entity. The fog was so thick that my headlights barely illuminated the road. It felt like I was driving through a wall of cotton wool. Every tree seemed to hide in this impenetrable white mass. The fog not only restricted my vision, but also took away my sense of space and time. I no longer knew how long I had been driving or how far I still had to go. An unsettling silence accompanied the fog, no sound of animals, no rustling of leaves, nothing. It was as if the forest was holding its breath. An eerie feeling of isolation and disorientation came over me. The fog had led me into its own world, and I couldn't find my way back. As I continued through the fog, I suddenly heard a sound. It was like a soft whisper, barely perceptible, as if coming from deep within the forest. I turned down the radio to hear better, but the voice disappeared. Seconds later, it reappeared, closer and clearer this time. It sounded like a language I didn't understand, a soft murmur that permeated the fog. I looked around, but there was nothing. Only the endless foggy road and the silhouettes of the trees that seemed to stare at me from the darkness. My heart started to beat faster. It was as if the forest had come alive and was speaking to me, trying to lure me deeper into its realm. The sounds grew louder, mixing with a crackling, as if someone or something was creeping through the undergrowth. Panic grew within me. I pressed the gas pedal, wanting to get out of this cursed forest as quickly as possible. But no matter how fast I drove, the fog wouldn't clear and the sounds remained as if pursuing me. After a while, I spotted something by the roadside that made my blood run cold. It was a truck abandoned in the fog. Its doors were wide open as if the driver had left in a panic. I stopped and got out, my eyes fixed on the vehicle. A strange feeling came over me, but I had to know what had happened. I approached the truck carefully. The cab was empty, but I could almost smell the cold sweat and fear. On the driver's seat lay a tattered notebook. I picked it up and flipped through it. The pages were filled with hastily scrawled notes, brimming with fear. "They're coming, no escape, the forest is alive." It was disjointed, but the desperation was palpable. A faint scratching made me turn around. Out of the fog, shadows emerged, at first indistinct, then clearer and clearer. They were figures, human yet distorted. Their faces were pale, their eyes empty and black, as if they had lost all hope. They moved slowly towards me like a ghostly procession. My legs were paralyzed with fear. I knew I couldn't stay if I wanted to survive. With trembling hands, I started my truck again and drove off, leaving the abandoned truck behind me. The fog around me seemed denser than ever, and my thoughts raced. What had I just seen? People, or was my mind playing a cruel trick on me? I couldn't say, but the sight of the figures wouldn't leave me. As I drove, the fog in front of me began to change. It formed strange patterns as if trying to convey a message. Then I saw it, a face. It was pale, its eyes black and empty, just like the figures I had seen before. It was directly in front of my truck, huge and ominous. My heart skipped a beat and I stomped on the brakes in a panic. The truck came to a halt and the face dissolved, disappearing back into the fog. But the cold it left behind remained. I sat there, trembling, unable to form a clear thought. The forest was playing with me, trying to break my mind, to drive me insane, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could withstand this terror. I continued driving, hoping to get out of this damned stretch of forest soon. But no matter how far I drove, the landscape didn't change. It was as if I was driving in circles, trapped in an endless loop. Every tree looked the same, every shadow seemed to follow me. A suffocating feeling of hopelessness spread within me. I checked the GPS, but it only showed an endless line, no waypoints, no exits, just a straight road leading nowhere. Despair crept up in me. Had the forest pulled me into some dimension beyond reality? Was I doomed to stay here forever, trapped in this fog? Then I saw it again, the abandoned truck. It stood in exactly the same spot as before, as if I had never driven away from it. But this time something was different. On the driver's seat sat a figure pointing at me. Its face was obscured by shadows, but I could feel the immense sadness and terror emanating from it. The circle had closed and I was in its center. My watch showed that hours had passed, but it felt like only minutes. Time had no meaning here. It didn't flow, it stagnated. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized I might have been here longer than I could comprehend. I tried to use my phone to call for help, but no signal was available. It was as if I had been ripped out of the world and thrown into this nightmare landscape where space and time were mere shadows of themselves. My hands trembled as I put my phone away. I was alone, completely alone in this endless stretch of forest. As I continued driving, a strange feeling of exhaustion came over me. My eyelids grew heavy, my thoughts blurry. It was as if the forest was lulling me, trying to make me close my eyes and surrender to it. But I fought against it, knowing that falling asleep could mean my end. Suddenly, a building emerged from the fog. It was an old, weathered house standing off the road. The windows were black, the door hung crookedly on its hinges. It was the first sign of civilization I had seen in hours. Despite my better judgment, I was magically drawn to it. I stopped and got out. The ground beneath my feet felt soft and unnatural, almost as if it were giving way. The house looked as if it could collapse at any moment, yet I had to go inside. Something in me said that answers to what I was going through lay here. Slowly, I opened the door and it creaked loudly. The interior was dark and cold, filled with the smell of mold and decay. A feeling of apprehension gripped me as I entered the house. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching me, following my steps. I wasn't alone here, I knew that now. Inside the house, I found a row of photos hanging on the walls. Each one showed the forest in different stages, from green and vibrant to dead and decaying. But one thing remained the same in every picture: the fog. It was always there, hovering like a ghost over the trees. As I looked at the pictures, my gaze fell on a note stuck to the wall. The words were written in a shaky hand: "They are coming for you, run while you still can." My heart skipped a beat. Who had written that, and who was it warning me about? Suddenly I heard the whispering again, louder this time, more urgent. It filled the room, coming from the walls, from the floor, from everywhere. The photographs began to tremble, falling to the floor, and a cold gust of wind swept through the room. It was time to go, and I ran out without looking back. When I got back to the road, I noticed that the fog had changed. It had become darker, denser, and seemed to move, to breathe. I got into the truck and drove off, but this time there was no escape. The fog followed me, closing in around me like a living entity. I drove faster, but the fog remained, thickening before my eyes and taking on shapes I couldn't describe. It was as if the forest itself was coming towards me, wanting to engulf me. Shadows darted through the light of my headlights, figures I couldn't see but could feel. The unknown seemed to have taken control. The road beneath me disappeared, and I drove through a darkness that surrounded me from all sides. My thoughts swirled, my mind threatened to break. Was I still alive, or was this the transition to another world? In the midst of this hellish ride, a light suddenly appeared before me. It was bright and blinding, and I had to squint to see anything. It was a figure in the middle of the road, directly in front of my truck. I slammed on the brakes in a panic. The truck skidded, and I felt the ground beneath me give way. The truck came to a halt, and I looked up. The figure was gone, but the light remained, a faint glow piercing the fog. I got out, barely able to breathe from fear. The light hovered before me, and I followed it as if in a trance. It led me deeper into the forest until I suddenly stood at a cliff. The light went out, and I stood in complete darkness. Below me only the abyss, behind me the endless forest. At that moment I knew there was no way out. The forest had me, and it would never let me go. One last whisper sounded in my ear, and I felt the ground beneath me give way. The ultimate terror enveloped me, and I fell into the depths. It was late at night, and I was driving along a long, lonely country road. The surroundings were dark, and only my headlights pierced the pitch-black darkness. No other cars, no houses, just the endless road and the constant monotony of the asphalt ribbon before me. An uneasy feeling accompanied me, as if this road was leading me to a destination I didn't want to reach. I had been driving for hours and felt the exhaustion in my bones. The thought of a break urged itself upon me, but something kept me from stopping. It was as if the darkness around me didn't want to let me go. A queasy feeling spread in my stomach, and I couldn't ignore it. Suddenly, at the edge of my vision, I noticed a movement, a figure appearing by the roadside and seeming to stare at me. My heart rate accelerated. I was sure there had been no one there when I last looked. Who or what could hide so quickly in the darkness? As I got closer, I recognized a person, a man standing there, thumb outstretched, as if wanting a ride. He wore dark clothes, and his face was hidden in shadow. A hitchhiker, I thought. Normally I would have stopped, but tonight everything was different. Something about this figure aroused a deep, instinctive fear in me. I slowed down, unsure why. Something in me compelled me to look closer. But when I was abreast of the man, I noticed something uncanny. His face was pale and expressionless, as if it knew no emotions. His eyes were empty, two black holes that stared right through me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I accelerated again. The feeling that I was leaving something dangerous behind remained, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, the man was gone, just gone. My heart pounded, and I wondered if I was losing my mind. Had I imagined it all? Was it just an apparition in the darkness? I drove on, the image of the hitchhiker firmly embedded in my thoughts. Minutes passed, perhaps hours, when I suddenly felt I was no longer alone. An inexplicable feeling of presence filled the truck, as if someone or something was sitting in the passenger seat. I barely dared to turn my head, afraid of what I might see. The truck suddenly grew colder and my breath turned into a small cloud in front of my face. It wasn't just the cold of the night, but something much more eerie. I could hear my own pulse, the blood rushing in my ears, and then I felt it, a gaze resting on me as if eyes were piercing me. Slowly, with trembling hands, I turned my head to the side. The passenger seat was empty, yet in the faint light of the dashboard, I thought I saw the imprint of a body in the seat cushion, as if someone had just been sitting there. Fear constricted my throat. Who or what had entered my truck? Was it possible that the hitchhiker had managed to sneak in this unnatural way? The truck drove on as if in a dream state. I couldn't take my eyes off the empty seat. Then I heard it, a soft whisper right next to my ear. It was indistinct, barely more than a breath, but it made my blood run cold. It sounded like a voice saying something I couldn't understand, words spoken in a language I didn't know. I wrestled with the steering wheel, my body stiff with fear. The whispering grew louder, more urgent, as if it wanted to tell me something. I turned up the radio, trying to drown out the sound, but it was no use. The voice penetrated everything, as if it were being sent directly into my head. A tremor gripped my entire body. With all my might, I tried to ignore the whispering, to focus on the road, but it wouldn't disappear. The words repeated themselves over and over again, and with each repetition, they seemed to gain more meaning. As if they were burning themselves into my brain, forcing me to listen and understand. And at that moment, I realized that I had let something dark into my truck, something that wouldn't let me go. As I struggled with the steering wheel, I suddenly felt a coldness on my arm. When I looked down, I saw a pale hand closing around my forearm. The skin was corpse pale, the fingers ice cold and clammy. The hand belonged to no one I could see. It came from nowhere and grabbed me. A scream caught in my throat as I tried to free my arm, but the hand held me tightly with a strength I couldn't explain. The cold spread from my arm throughout my entire body, and I felt panic rise within me. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidded, and for a moment I thought I would lose control. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the hand vanished. The pressure eased and I could move my arm again. But the imprint of the fingers remained, a red shadow on my skin. I breathed heavily, trying to gather my thoughts. What was that? A ghost? An illusion? Or had I already descended into madness? I forced myself to keep driving, even though my heart was still racing. My thoughts swirled, trying to make sense of the chaos. Then I saw it again, the figure of the hitchhiker, this time not by the roadside, but in the rearview mirror. He was sitting on the back of my truck, motionless, his black eyes fixed directly on me. My breath caught, and I felt my heart almost leap out of my chest. How could he be there? How could he appear so silently and suddenly? The questions hammered in my head, but no answer could relieve the fear that overwhelmed me. I wanted to stop, get out, and make sure it was just an illusion, but something held me back. It was as if the darkness around me prevented me from moving. The hitchhiker in the mirror didn't move. He remained rigidly seated, his eyes fixed on me as if wanting to look into my soul. I knew I shouldn't look back, that I had to focus on the road, but I couldn't help it. The sight had something magnetic about it, something that pulled me into its spell and wouldn't let go. With every mile I drove, the road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly. There was no end, no destination, just the same darkness and the monotonous line of asphalt. A feeling of despair came over me. Was I doomed to stay on this road forever, pursued by a ghostly hitchhiker who wouldn't let me go? Minutes turned into hours, and I lost all sense of time. The figure in the rearview mirror remained unchanged, rigid and ominous. I tried to ignore it, but it was always there in my field of vision, a constant companion in this nightmare. A part of me wondered if there was even a way back. The darkness seemed to grow denser, heavier, and the truck began to behave strangely. The lights flickered, the radio crackled as if some foreign power wanted to take control. I felt as if I was being pulled into another dimension, into a place where time and space no longer had meaning. Suddenly the radio fell silent and a clear, calm voice sounded. It was the hitchhiker's voice. "You are on the wrong path," it said. The words echoed in my head as if spoken directly into my mind. "You must turn back before it's too late." A cold shiver ran down my spine. And I knew I had to act, but what did it mean to turn back? Where? I didn't even know where I was. Everything around me was darkness and horror. There was no way back, no way to escape this nightmare. Yet the hitchhiker's voice was clear and insistent, as if offering one last chance to save me. I closed my eyes, concentrating on the sound of his voice. "You are on the wrong path." The words burned into my consciousness, and suddenly I felt a clarity I hadn't had before. I had to change something, do something different to escape this horror. With a deep breath, I decided to take the risk. I put the truck in reverse and slowly began to back up. The darkness seemed to change, to recede, as if fighting against my decision. But I kept driving further and further, my gaze fixed on the rearview mirror where the hitchhiker still sat. Seconds turned into hours as I tried to find my way back. The road around me blurred as if dissolving, and a feeling of relief began to spread within me. Was this the way back to reality, back to the world I knew? But suddenly, without warning, the hitchhiker vanished from the mirror. He dissolved like smoke in the wind. A cold breath swept through the truck, and I knew I had made it. The presence that had been following me was gone, and the darkness around me began to lighten. I stopped the truck and got out, my legs trembling with exhaustion. The air was clear and cool, and as I looked around, I realized I was in a different place. The road was the same, but the darkness had receded. It was as if I had woken up from a nightmare that no longer held me. I looked back, searching for a sign of the hitchhiker, but there was nothing, only the silent road and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. I knew I had escaped something eerie, something that could have swallowed me whole if I hadn't found the courage to face it. With a last look at the empty road, I got back in the truck and continued my journey. But the thought of the hitchhiker would never leave me. He had been there, a shadow in the darkness, and I knew he would be out there somewhere, ready to lure the next lonely driver into his spell. On a moonless night, I was driving through a lonely mountain road. The only light came from my truck's headlights, illuminating the narrow road ahead. It was a route I had never taken before. The path was off my usual track, but I had been looking for a shortcut to save time. Soon I noticed that the road was getting narrower and bumpier. The branches of the trees bent over the path, forming a kind of tunnel of darkness. An oppressive feeling came over me, as if I was venturing deeper into something from which there was no escape. Yet the thought of turning back didn't occur to me. A strange curiosity drove me on. As I drove, I noticed a turnoff, a narrow, overgrown path leading into the forest. It wasn't an official path, that was clear, but something about it drew me in. Without really thinking about it, I steered the truck onto the path and drove in, the engine purring softly. Whatever lay at the end of this path, I had to find out. The path was narrow and surrounded by dense vegetation. It was as if the trees wanted to swallow me, pulling me deeper and deeper into the forest. I felt the temperature drop, an unpleasant tingling spreading in the back of my neck. The forest was silent, unnaturally silent, as if even the animals were holding their breath. Suddenly, in the beam of my headlights, something appeared, a figure. I instinctively stomped on the brakes. The figure remained motionless in the light, and I tried to make out its contours. It was a woman dressed in an old-fashioned dress that fluttered in the wind, though there was no wind. Her face was pale, her eyes empty and staring into nothingness. I felt my heart beat faster, my breath caught in my throat. Who was this woman? What was she doing here in the middle of the forest at this hour? My thoughts raced, and I fought the urge to put the truck in reverse and just drive away. But something held me back. It was as if the woman was urging me to come closer. The woman didn't move, so I decided to continue driving. Slowly, the truck rolled forward and the figure disappeared from the beam of my headlights, but my gaze remained fixed on the forest, expecting her to reappear at any moment. But it remained quiet. Darkness enveloped everything. Then, unexpectedly, the forest opened up and I saw it, an old chapel. It stood there, surrounded by dense undergrowth, its walls overgrown with moss and climbing plants. The building looked abandoned and forgotten, as if it hadn't been entered for decades, yet at the same time it radiated an aura that made me shiver. I parked the truck and got out, unsure why I was approaching this place. The air was cold and every step crunched on the gravel path. The chapel seemed to be calling me as if it held a secret waiting to be revealed. With trembling hands, I pushed open the old wooden door and stepped inside. Inside the chapel, there was an unnatural coldness. The walls were covered with mold and the floor was covered with dirt and leaves as if the wind had carried the traces of time inside. It was obvious that no one had been here for a long time, yet I felt a presence, an observation that I couldn't explain. In the middle of the room stood an altar on which lay a dusty Bible. The pages were yellowed and the leather of the binding was cracked. But on one page the book seemed to be open and a strange symbol was drawn on it. It was not a Christian symbol, but something I didn't recognize. It looked like an old, eerie sign that triggered a fear deep within me that I couldn't explain. Then I noticed it. On the floor around the altar, candles were set up. They had burned down, and in the air hung a hint of wax and something else, something metallic, blood. A shiver ran through me and I took a step back. What had happened here? And why had it drawn me here? As I stood there in the midst of this dilapidated chapel, I suddenly began to hear a sound. It was faint, almost like a whisper, and it came from somewhere inside the building. My heart skipped a beat. Was I alone, or was someone hiding in the darkness, watching me? The whispering grew louder, seeming to come from the walls, from the corners of the room where the shadows were densest. I turned around, searching for the source, but there was nothing. Only the emptiness and the cold. My thoughts raced. Was this why the chapel was abandoned? Had the villagers left it out of fear of what lurked here? I wanted to go back to my truck, just wanted to get away from this cursed place. But my legs didn't seem to obey. It was as if the chapel was holding me, as if it wouldn't let me simply leave. The whispering seemed to be saying my name, and a shiver ran down my spine. I knew I was in danger, but I couldn't move. All at once, the whispering fell silent, and an unnatural stillness spread through the chapel. The cold grew more intense, and I felt my fingers go numb. It was as if the chapel itself was holding its breath, as if it was waiting for something. And then from the darkness I heard a voice. It was faint, almost like an echo, and it spoke words I didn't understand. The words sounded ancient, like a language from long-forgotten times. They seemed to come from the shadows, and I felt my heart contract with fear. Who or what was speaking to me, and why did I understand that it was a warning that I should leave this place immediately before it was too late? I turned to run towards the door, but it had suddenly disappeared. Only an empty wall remained, no exit. Panic overwhelmed me, and I pounded against the walls, searching for a way out. But the chapel had me in its clutches. I was trapped, and I didn't know how to escape. In the next moment, I saw it, a shadow slowly detaching itself from the darkness and coming towards me. It wasn't a normal silhouette, but a distorted, ghostly being that moved like a mist through the chapel. My heart pounded in my throat, and I felt the cold breath of terror envelop me. The shadow seemed to grow, to change, and I recognized the face of the woman I had seen on the path. Her eyes were now fixed on me, empty and full of suffering. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear, but I understood that she didn't want me here. She was the spirit of this place, trapped in an eternal cycle of pain and darkness. I felt my stomach churn. What had happened here? What had turned her into this shadow that now stood before me, approaching? I stepped back, looking for an escape, but the chapel seemed to change. The walls drew together as if they wanted to crush me. Time seemed to stand still as the shadow moved towards me. I had to do something, had to find a way to escape this hell. My gaze fell on the candles arranged around the altar. An idea formed in my head, a desperate hope. Maybe I could light them again, maybe the light could drive away the shadow. With trembling hands, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a lighter. I rushed to the candles, lighting one after another, while the whispering in my head grew louder and louder. The light of the flames illuminated the room, and for a moment, I thought it was working. The shadow receded, and I felt the darkness recede. But then everything changed. The light flickered and went out. A cold gust of wind swept through the chapel, and the flames died. The shadow was now directly in front of me, and I felt an icy hand grip my heart. A scream escaped my throat, but no one was there to hear it. I was lost. At the last moment, I turned and ran to the door. My hands fumbled over the wall, searching for a handle, for an exit that would lead me to freedom. I felt the shadow coming closer, heard the faint chuckle that emanated from the darkness, and knew I had only moments left, and then suddenly the door was there again. I grabbed the handle, tore it open, and stumbled outside. The cool night air hit my face and I ran to my truck without looking back. The shadow was after me, I could feel it, but I wouldn't let it stop me. I jumped into the cab, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. With screeching tires, I sped away, racing back along the path from which I had come. The forest flew past me, the darkness dissolved, and I knew I had escaped. But the memory of the shadow of the abandoned chapel would haunt me forever. I got back to the main road, my breath still shallow and my heart pounding deafeningly. The terror I had experienced wouldn't leave me. I looked in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the woman's figure again at any moment, but there was only the empty road, no shadow, no movement. The night passed in a blurry fog. I kept driving further and further, unsure if I would ever find a place that wouldn't remind me of that damned chapel. In my head, the voices still echoed, the whispers and the screams I had heard there. It was as if a part of me had remained in the darkness of the forest. When morning finally dawned, I found a rest stop and pulled over. I got out, breathed in the fresh air, but the cold grip of fear remained. I knew I would never forget this night. The chapel and the shadow, they had become a part of me, a memory that would never let me go. I knew I would never find out what really happened in that chapel, but one thing was certain: some places you simply should never enter. I was on a long drive across the country when I decided to take a break. It was already late and darkness lay heavy over the road. A rest stop appeared by the roadside and I pulled in, glad for the chance to rest a bit. The rest stop was empty, only a few old lanterns cast a faint light on the parking lot. I parked the truck and got out, stretched my legs and took a deep breath. The air was cool and a strange silence hung over the place, no wind, no animals, not even the hum of insects. It was as if nature itself had decided to avoid this place. An uneasy feeling crept over me, but I shrugged it off, probably just my overtaxed nerves playing tricks on me, I thought. After stretching my legs a bit, I sat on the hood to eat a sandwich. The quiet was supposed to calm me down, but instead a feeling of unease grew within me. It was as if something was lurking in the woods around me, something watching me. I looked around, searching for movement in the shadows, but there was nothing, just the darkness. Suddenly a sound broke the silence, a faint rustling followed by a crackle, as if someone or something was creeping through the undergrowth. My heart skipped a beat. I stared in the direction the sound had come from, but I couldn't see anything. My mind tried to find a rational explanation: an animal, a gust of wind, anything. But the sound repeated itself, closer now, footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching over the leaves. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. Panic began to spread within me. Who was out there or what? I stood up, slowly walking back to the truck, my eyes constantly on the darkness. The feeling that I wasn't alone grew with every step. Then for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw something, a movement between the trees, a figure too large and too unnatural to be human. My heart rate quickened, and I knew I had to get out of here. Immediately, with trembling hands, I reached for the driver's door, pulled it open, and jumped into the truck. My pulse raced and my thoughts whirled. What had I seen out there? An animal, or was it something else, something much worse? I wanted to start the engine and just drive away, but my hands wouldn't obey me. I looked out through the windshield into the darkness. The light of the lanterns cast long shadows that seemed to move as if they were alive. Then I saw it again, a figure stepping out of the forest and coming towards me. My heart skipped a beat. It was no human, that was clear now. It was tall, broad-shouldered, and its eyes glowed an eerie red. Finally, I found the strength to turn the key. The engine roared and I stomped on the gas. The truck lurched forward and I sped down the rest stop, back onto the road. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw that the creature was following me. It ran faster than anything human could, and I felt fear overwhelm me. I floored the gas pedal, the truck accelerated, but the creature stayed close behind. It was like a nightmare that wouldn't let me go. In the rearview mirror, I saw it getting closer and closer, its form blurred in the darkness, only its glowing eyes clear and menacing. It was as if the creature was feeding on the night itself, becoming a part of the shadows. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. What was it? An animal? A demon? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't stop. I had to keep driving as fast as possible and try to shake this thing off. But no matter how much I accelerated, the creature seemed to get closer and closer. It was as if the road itself was helping it to follow me. The truck's engine roared, the tires squealed as I raced around curves. And every time I looked in the rearview mirror, the red eyes were there, closer, hungrier. Suddenly, without warning, the creature leaped onto the back of the truck. I felt the impact, heard the metallic crash as it landed on the cargo bed. My heart pounded in my throat and a scream caught in my throat. It was directly above me now and I could feel its weight resting on the body of the truck. I knew I had to act, but what could I do? The thing was on the truck and there was nowhere to flee. Then I heard it, the scratching. It sounded as if claws were scraping against the metal, trying to find a way inside. My stomach churned and I knew I couldn't keep it out for long. In a desperate attempt, I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded and the creature was thrown forward against the back wall of the cab. A blood-curdling shriek filled the night and I felt the metal buckle under the pressure. I knew I didn't have much time if I didn't do something immediately. The thing would get inside. With trembling hands, I grabbed the toolbox next to me. I opened it and pulled out the heaviest tool I could find, a large wrench. My heart pounded, my breath came in gasps, but I knew I had to fight back. There was no escape, only the fight. The creature continued scratching at the cab and I heard the metal beginning to bend. I gathered all my courage, opened the driver's door and stepped out, the wrench firmly in my hand. It was time to face the thing, time to put an end to the nightmare. I saw it straighten up, ready to pounce on me. Its eyes glowed an unnatural red and I felt the cold of fear run through my body, but I wouldn't be deterred. With a loud scream, I swung the wrench, hitting the creature directly on the side of its head. A shattering shriek sounded and the thing staggered back, disappearing into the darkness. After the fight, an eerie silence fell. My breathing was fast and shallow, and I felt sweat trickling down my face. I remained standing, the wrench still in my hand, listening into the darkness. No more scratching sound. Had I really driven it away, or was it only a temporary calm before the next attack? I got back into the truck, closed the door tightly behind me, and turned the key. The engine started and I floored the gas pedal. I just wanted to get away from this place as far as possible. The road opened up before me, and I drove as fast as I could, my gaze fixed straight ahead. But deep down, I knew the danger wasn't over yet. The creature was out there somewhere in the darkness, and it wouldn't forget me so easily. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time, but there was only the endless road and the black night that swallowed me. As I drove down the road, I tried to calm myself. The memories of the encounter wouldn't leave me, and I could still hear the scratching sound in my ears. Had I really escaped, or was my mind playing a cruel trick on me? I didn't know, but I couldn't stop staring into the darkness that stretched behind me. Then out of nowhere, I heard it again, a faint, muffled scratching coming from the back of the truck. My heart skipped a beat and I felt panic rise within me. Had the creature survived? Had it found a way back? I didn't want to believe it, but the sound grew louder as if getting closer. I knew I had to check, but fear held me back. My hands trembled and I couldn't take my eyes off the road. The scratching was now more intense, more desperate, and I knew I had to face the horror again. With a deep breath, I grabbed the flashlight next to me and carefully opened the door. Slowly, with a pounding heart, I crept to the back of the truck. The scratching was clearly audible now, and I knew there was no doubt the creature was back. But how? How had it survived? Or had I ever driven it away at all? My thoughts swirled as I directed the flashlight onto the cargo bed. For a moment, I thought I saw nothing. The cargo bed was empty, just the usual freight, nothing unusual. But then, as I looked closer, I discovered it, a trail of claw marks running across the metal floor. It was as if something had tried to bore its way through the wall to get inside. My stomach churned. Had it been hiding here all along? Was it still here? The thought made me shiver and I took a step back. Then I heard it again, the scratching, this time from the cab. My blood froze and I knew I wasn't alone. With a feeling of dread, I turned around and looked into the cab. There was nothing, only the emptiness and the faint light of the streetlights. But the scratching was still there, louder now, closer. I looked around, searching for the source, but there was nothing. Then, as if the ground beneath me moved, I felt it. The creature was inside me. It was no longer outside, no longer something I could drive away with a wrench. It had found a way into my mind, nestled itself into my thoughts. I couldn't see it, couldn't touch it, but it was in my head, a parasite feeding on my fear. I got back into the truck, my body trembling. I knew I couldn't escape this nightmare. The creature had become a part of me, a shadow that would never let me go. And as I sped down the road into the unknown, I knew that the true horror wasn't in the darkness out there, but deep within myself. It was a foggy night, and I was driving through a remote region. The road was lonely, hardly any other vehicles were on the road. Only the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio kept me company. It was a routine drive, nothing special, but something about this night felt different. The darkness seemed denser, the fog more impenetrable. I turned on the radio to chat with other drivers, but all channels were silent. No static, no sound. As if all connections had been cut. An uneasy feeling spread within me. Usually there was always someone on the channels, but not tonight, to be alone. Suddenly, without warning, I heard a voice. It was faint, barely more than a whisper, but I could hear it clearly. "Can you hear me?" it asked. My fingers hovered hesitantly over the microphone. Who was that, and why did it sound so familiar? I pressed the button to answer, but at that moment the voice had already disappeared. Only silence remained. I tried to forget the incident, concentrating back on the road, but the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave me. The fog grew denser, almost swallowing the light of my headlights. The world around me seemed to be changing, and I began to doubt my own sanity. Then suddenly the voice sounded again from the radio. "You are not alone," it said. My heart skipped a beat. The voice now sounded clearer, more urgent, as if it came directly from the shadows of the night. I tried to answer, but my mouth was dry. What did this voice want from me, and why did it feel as if it was echoing in my head? I forced myself to stay calm and reached for the microphone again. "Who's there?" I asked. No words, just the crackling and static of the device. But then, after an agonizingly long pause, the voice spoke again. "You are in danger," it whispered, and at that moment, I knew this was no ordinary radio communication. With growing concern, I continued driving, my eyes scanning the road and the surroundings, searching for an explanation for what I had just experienced. But the fog obscured everything, leaving me driving blindly through the night. It was as if I was in another world, one where the normal rules no longer applied. The radio remained silent, but the voice's words echoed in my head. "You are in danger." What did that mean? Was it a warning or just a trick of my own mind? I didn't know, but a feeling of panic began to rise within me. I had to get out of here, had to stop somewhere and calm down. Just as I had that thought, I noticed a movement by the roadside. My gaze darted there, and for a moment I saw a figure. It was blurred like a shadow in the fog, but I could make out its outline, a human standing motionless, its eyes fixed on me. My breath caught, and I wrenched the steering wheel, trying to keep control of the truck. But when I looked back at the road, the figure was gone. I drove on, the image of the figure firmly implanted in my mind. Had I really seen it, or was it just a hallucination caused by fear in the fog? I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was just my imagination, but deep down I knew something was wrong. Then the voice sounded again, louder this time, more urgent. "Do you hear me?" It now sounded more familiar, as if it came from someone I knew, but that was impossible. No one knew I was here, no one could reach me in this deserted area. "You must stop," the voice said. "It's getting closer." A cold wave of fear ran through me. What did it mean? What was getting closer? I looked in the rearview mirror, but there was only the fog that swallowed everything. My heart pounded in my chest, and I knew I couldn't just keep driving. Something was lurking in the darkness, and it was only a matter of time before it caught up with me. I decided to turn off the radio. The silence was almost palpable as I turned the knob and the strange voice fell silent, but the quiet brought no relief. Instead, it only deepened the feeling of isolation. The fog surrounded me and the darkness seemed to grow denser as if it wanted to swallow me. I knew I should stop, but I couldn't. Something was driving me forward, forcing me to keep driving, even though every instinct told me I was in danger. The road was empty, not a single vehicle in sight, and I felt like the last person on Earth. A strange feeling of desolation came over me, and I wondered if I would ever find my way back. Then out of nowhere, I heard a soft knocking. It came from the back of the cab, a rhythmic, gentle knocking, as if someone or something was tapping on the door. My blood froze. I turned around, expecting to see something, but there was nothing, just the darkness that surrounded me. The knocking stopped, but the fear remained. Suddenly, without warning, the radio began to crackle on its own, even though I had turned it off. A static hiss filled the cab, and I stared at it, unable to comprehend what was happening. Then I heard the voice again, clearer and louder than ever. "You cannot escape," it said. "It's already here." At that moment, I saw it. A figure appeared in the middle of the road, directly in front of the truck. I slammed on the brakes in a panic, but it was too late. The truck slid, went into a skid, and I felt myself losing control. The figure stood motionless, and when the light of my headlights hit it, I saw that it was no one I knew. It was a shadow, formless yet terrifying, with glowing eyes that stared right through me. The truck came to a sudden halt, and I gasped for air. The figure was gone, and all that remained was the fog. My heart pounded, and I knew I had to move, had to do something to get out of this hell, but my hands were paralyzed and the radio began to crackle again. I grabbed the radio, hoping to get an answer, something that would explain what was going on. "What do you want from me?" I screamed into the microphone, my voice sounding strange and panicked. The static grew louder, and then suddenly I heard the voice again. "You are lost," it said, and I felt a coldness pass through my body. The words echoed in my head, and I felt my thoughts clouding as if a foreign power was taking possession of me. Was it really over? Was I doomed to stay on this road forever, pursued by something I couldn't see or understand? The thought made me shiver, and I knew I couldn't give up. With a last spark of willpower, I started the engine again. The truck rattled, but it started. I floored the gas and drove off, my gaze fixed on the road. The fog didn't lift, but I knew I had to keep driving, that I couldn't stop. Something or someone was trying to drag me into the darkness, and I wouldn't let it win. The road stretched endlessly before me, and I drove without destination or hope, only with the urge to escape the darkness. The radio remained silent, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me. I knew the danger was still there, invisible yet omnipresent. Hours passed. Or perhaps it was only minutes. I had lost all sense of time, no longer knew where I was or where I was going. All I wanted was to leave this eerie road behind me. Then suddenly I saw lights on the horizon, houses, civilization, a sign that I had made it. I drove on, my heart pounding in my throat. The lights came closer, and I felt a sense of relief spread within me. I had escaped. I had escaped the nightmare, and reality was slowly returning. But one thought wouldn't leave me. What had that been, and why had it pursued me? I reached the town and parked the truck in a busy parking lot. People walked by, it was brightly lit, and the fog had disappeared. I got out, breathed the cold air, and felt the terror slowly subside. But deep down, I knew it wasn't really over. The voice, the figure, the fog, they had been more than just an illusion. They had conveyed a message, a warning that I hadn't fully understood yet. I looked at the radio, which lay silently on the dashboard, and a shiver ran down my spine. It was as if it was waiting to come back to life, to tell me more of the truth. I shook my head, trying to banish the thoughts, but I knew that the memory of this night would stay with me forever. It had burned itself into my consciousness, an indelible memory of the voices on the radio and what they had wanted to tell me. And I knew that I would never be safe again when I drove through the darkness. Before I left the truck, I turned around one last time and looked at the empty road behind me. There was nothing, just the normality of everyday life, people going about their business, cars passing by. But deep down, I knew that the darkness hadn't disappeared. It was lurking somewhere out there, waiting for the next driver it could draw into its spell. I closed the door and walked away, trying to leave the events of that night behind me. But a part of me knew that I would always look back, always have to be on guard, because the voice on the radio had shown me something I could no longer ignore. That there were things in this world beyond our understanding, things waiting to find us. It was late and I had been on the road for hours. My eyes burned with fatigue and I knew I had to take a break soon. As I drove past a secluded gas station, I decided to pull over. The gas station was old and dilapidated, and the neon light flickered menacingly. No other vehicles, no sign of life. I got out, stretched, and walked to the pump. The silence was almost palpable. Only the faint hum of the neon tubes could be heard as I filled the truck. I suddenly felt that I wasn't alone. A cold shiver ran down my spine and I turned around. Nothing. The gas station was just as empty as I had found it. I shrugged and tried to shake off the eerie feeling, probably just my overstrained nerves, I thought. But when I got back into the truck and looked in the mirror, I noticed a shadow. At the edge of the parking lot, just a few meters away, stood a figure, tall, motionless, and it seemed to be staring directly at me. My heart started to beat faster and I tried to make out the figure more clearly. It was a man, but something about him wasn't right. He wore dark clothes and his face was hidden in shadow. I blinked, thinking it might just be an optical illusion, but as I looked closer, I realized what disturbed me so much. He had no face. Where his face should have been, there was only a smooth, blank surface, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Who or what was this man, and why was he just standing there without moving? Every instinct told me I had to get out of here immediately. I started the truck, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The figure didn't move, just watched me from a distance. With one last look in the rearview mirror, I drove off, leaving the gas station and the man without a face behind me. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me. It was as if he was still there in my head. I continued driving, the engine humming monotonously in the silent night. The thought of the man without a face wouldn't leave me. What had that been? A hallucination, a trick of the light? But deep down, I knew it had been real, too real, and that disturbed me more than I wanted to admit. After a few kilometers, I dared to glance in the rearview mirror. My heart skipped a beat. He was there. The man without a face stood in the middle of the road, as if appearing out of nowhere. My pulse quickened and I floored the gas pedal. How had he gotten here and why was he following me? I drove faster, trying to escape him, but every time I looked in the mirror, he was there, always at the same distance, always motionless, as if just waiting for me to slow down. Panic began to spread within me. What did he want from me? Was it possible that he had somehow cursed me? I pressed the gas pedal all the way down. The truck raced down the road. The darkness around me seemed to grow denser, and the sound of the wind filled the cab. But no matter how fast I drove, the feeling of threat wouldn't leave me. It was as if the man without a face was still there, following me without me being able to see him. The road was deserted, no other vehicles, no houses, just the endless darkness. I searched for a way out, for a place where I could stop and hide, but there was nothing. The world seemed to conspire against me, and I was alone in this nightmare. Then, as if from nowhere, and turnoff appeared, a narrow path leading into the forest. Without thinking, I wrenched the steering wheel and turned off. The tires squealed and the truck skidded before it straightened itself out. I drove down the path, which was surrounded by dense trees. The light of the headlights cut through the darkness. I hoped that I could finally shake off the man without a face. The path led to a clearing where an old, abandoned hut stood. Without thinking, I stopped the truck and got out. The air was cold and damp, and I felt my breath condense in small clouds in front of my face. The hut looked uninhabited, the windows were dark, and the wood was rotten and decayed. I walked slowly towards the hut, my eyes scanning the surroundings for the man without a face. Nothing, no sound, no movement. Maybe I had managed to shake him off. But the feeling of apprehension wouldn't leave me. Something was wrong. And I knew I wasn't safe. I opened the hut door and stepped inside. It was damp and musty inside. The floorboards creaked under my steps. It was obvious that no one had been here for years, yet at the same time I had the uncanny feeling that someone was watching me. I closed the door behind me and tried to stay calm. Maybe I could stay here until morning dawned and the danger was over. The hours passed in agonizing slowness. I sat in the hut, listening into the darkness. But there was nothing, only the silence and the occasional creaking of the old wood. I began to believe that I was indeed safe, that the man without a face hadn't found me. But then I felt it again, that coldness, that presence that took my breath away. I turned, my eyes searching the darkness, and there he was. He stood at the edge of the clearing, only a few meters from the hut. His face, or rather what wasn't a face, seemed to be staring directly at me. My heart pounded, and I couldn't take my eyes off him. He didn't move, said nothing, but his mere presence was enough to send me into a panic. What did he want from me? Why was he following me? The questions swirled in my head, and I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't just sit here and wait for him to come closer. I had to act, had to find a way to escape him before it was too late. In a fit of desperation, I grabbed a rusty iron rod that lay in the corner of the hut. It was the only thing I had for defense. With a pounding heart, I stepped outside, confronting the man without a face. If he wanted to take me, then I would fight. I walked towards him, holding the iron rod tightly in my hand, but the closer I got, the less real he seemed to become. His form shimmered as if he were made of smoke, and yet there was that threat hanging in the air. I raised the iron rod, ready to strike, but he didn't move. He just stood there, silent and motionless. "What do you want from me?" I screamed, my voice cracking with fear. No answer, no sound, only the unbearable silence. Then in a single fluid motion, he took a step forward, and I felt a wave of horror run through me. It was as if the darkness itself was coming towards me, wanting to swallow me. I stepped back, my whole body trembling with fear. The man without a face remained standing, as if waiting for something, but I didn't know what it was. I was trapped, caught in this nightmare with no way out and no hope. Every step I retreated seemed to bring him closer, even though he wasn't moving. In my panic, I turned and ran back into the hut. I slammed the door shut behind me and slid the old bolt, but I knew it wouldn't help. He wasn't of this world, and no door, no bolt could hold him back. I was in his trap, and there was no escape. I sat down on the floor, the iron rod still gripped tightly in my hand. My thoughts raced, and I searched for a plan, a way to escape him, but the longer I thought, the more hope faded. It was as if he had driven me into a corner, as if he had control over my every move. Minutes passed, and I stared at the door, waiting for the inevitable. The darkness in the hut seemed to grow denser, and I heard my own breathing, the only sound in the silent night. Then suddenly I felt it, a movement behind me. Slowly I turned my head, and there he was. The man without a face had entered the hut without me noticing. He stood only a few centimeters from me, and his faceless mask was directed at me. My heart skipped a beat, and I knew it was over. There was no escape. He had found me, and now he would take me. He raised his hand, and I saw that it was not human. The fingers were long and bony, the skin gray and dry like paper. I wanted to scream, wanted to run away, but my body no longer obeyed me. The cold that emanated from him seemed to envelop me, to crush me. It was as if death itself was reaching for me. In the last moment before his hands touched me, everything vanished. The hut, the darkness, the man without a face. Everything dissolved into a black mist, and I fell into an endless abyss. I woke up in my truck, the engine running, and I was still driving down the lonely road. Sweat stood on my forehead, and my breath came in gasps. Had it only been a dream, a terrible, vivid nightmare? I looked in the rearview mirror, searching for a sign, for anything that would tell me what had happened, but there was nothing, only the endless road and the darkness that surrounded me. I shook my head, trying to get rid of the memory, but deep down I knew it had been real. The man without a face was real, and he had found me. Perhaps he had spared me, or perhaps he was just waiting for the right moment to return. And as I continued driving further and further into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still there, somewhere in the darkness, waiting, lurking, ready to pursue me again. For the man without a face was not just a nightmare. He was the shadow that hunts us all, that catches up to us in our darkest moments. And one day I knew now he would return.